Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session on reviews, where we're looking at how do we reposition these meetings in the minds of our clients so that we retain them and we generate plenty of revenue. But have you ever struggled to get your client to a review? Perhaps you've emailed them, you haven't got a response, you might have written to them, you've called them, you've left them voicemails, and still they're not getting back to you. So what's going on? Do they feel like, well, it's in the past, it's behind me, I'm not that bothered? Do they feel like, well, you fixed everything when I first started working with you, so I don't really see the relevance? Or maybe they feel like there's some, fear around. Perhaps they wish they had a bit more money than they do, and they just don't really want to face it. There could be lots of reasons why there's some reluctance to the review and attending it. And I'm going to uncover some of these reasons. And I think part of the reason is because I tend to see some advisors making some common mistakes, which we will uncover today. So, in terms of what's coming up, I have planned to go over those 5 common mistakes. I do a lot of work in this area, and just making a few small changes can make quite a big difference. I want to share the ground rules, three ground rules for effective communication. I know some of you've probably been on this session before, so this might act as a refresher. But when you understand those ground rules, you can then see why some of your pre-meeting communications might not be as effective as they could be. Some people feel like their review process is a little bit repetitive, and they've been working with their clients for many years and are looking for ways to sort of refresh it. So I'm going to share just a few questions with you that you can adopt if you like. Then we'll be looking at how you might confidently convey the value of your advice. Of course, value is subjective. And I want to share some frameworks and some research that Boring Money have compiled, because I think it's very insightful and might help you think about how you ask certain questions in your meeting. And then lastly, I want to share one idea that really can make all the difference. In terms of what to expect, I'm going to share as much as I can. I want to make this super practical so you can implement stuff straight away and give you some things to consider over the longer term. I'd love this to be interactive, so please use the chat if you can. And if you do want some more resources, then I have put together a pack called Ace Your Annual Review, and I will share a code and a QR code so that you can access that at the end. It is being recorded, so if you want to watch it again, I'll circulate the link to all of those of you who have registered. So if we haven't met before, hi, my name is Melissa, and I specialise in helping those in the finance sector to communicate more effectively. My background is psychology. I come from a long line of people in the advertising industry, so I'm really interested in how we use words to change behaviour. I don't want to spend too much time talking about me. If you'd like to learn a bit more about my background, my LinkedIn profile is on the end of that QR code, so you can scan that. But as I mentioned, I noticed that there are 5 common mistakes. And I want to run through these so that hopefully, once you're aware of them, you can avoid them. So the first is that, as the name suggests, we're reviewing the past. And I think this is perhaps come from the fact that years ago it was all about products and performance, so we were looking at the reviewing the performance of those things, and of course that is still an element. It's just that we don't tend to be as interested in the past as the future. It's behind us, it seems less relevant, so sometimes people don't want to go to the reviews because it's called a review and it's about the past. The second is, I noticed that quite a lot of firms are sending letters or emails or making calls, and they're just not getting much response. And I think this is for a number of reasons. I think the standard templated letter gives off the impression that clients are just sort of cookie cut, it's a kind of cookie cutter approach where they're not being their individual situation isn't necessarily being communicated, and that can make clients feel less important. So I think templated letters. I know templates are important in terms of efficiencies. And I think there is a way to strike the balance between personalizing your letter and not having to start from scratch each time. I think the language that is used in those letters can do with a little bit of a refresh. So yeah, I think I'll go over some of those observations in this session. I noticed that some advisors talk a lot in their meetings and they don't listen enough. And when I ask my clients about this, the advisors, often they'll say things like, but I've just got so much to tell them. There's so much I need to get through. We're so short of time. Or I hate silence. I'm really uncomfortable with silence. So they talk a lot. The trouble with talking a lot is that when we're talking, we're not learning. And these meetings are such an important element of fostering a strong relationship with your client. Client satisfaction is correlated to how many minutes clients are talking in these meetings. And so we really want to make sure that the client is doing most of the talking in these meetings. And of course, this rests on asking good questions and making sure the client feels safe enough to talk. Many of those things we can talk about on another session, but just bear that in mind. Clients do like to ensure that you understand them. And if we're doing all the talking, we're not learning. The next mistake or challenge I hear a lot is I'm just struggling to balance meeting the requirements and holding an engaging meeting. Like, how do I do that? I'm either too far on one side or, too far on the other. And they feel like there is this, well, I notice this perception that it's very difficult to do both. But I'm here to tell you that it is possible. And maybe some of you are doing that already and you can share your thoughts at the end. And then lastly, they seem to sort of lack this simple process really to get engagement right the way through their process. And once we've got engagement, then we've got much more understanding, and then we're more likely to retain and also get more referrals from clients that we want to work with. So I'd just love to get a sense from you, which of these do you recognize, if any? You could just pop it in the chat. Which of these? All of them. Number 2. Oh, yeah. Okay. 2 and 5. Yeah. Number 2. Okay, good. Lots of number 2s. Great. A mix of all of them. Yeah. I'll touch on all of them, but I just want to get a sense of where the struggle is. Yeah. 4. Okay. Super. All right. Thank you for sharing that. 2 and 5. I think it's the pre-comms is what we're going to be talking about quite a lot in this session, because once you get your clients to the meeting, you're most of the way there. So let's start with some context and some principles. I learned this from Andy Bounds, who was a communication expert many years ago, and it's really stuck with me. And he says that effective communication isn't actually about what you write or what you say, it's about what people do afterwards. So if we're writing those letters and we're not getting any response, or they're not resulting in a meeting, our communication hasn't worked. If you don't implement one thing after this webinar, then my communication hasn't worked. And of course, I'm going to be doing my best to make sure that doesn't happen. But in order to get people to do something, we first of all got to get their attention. And we are now in the attention economy, as you might well know. And Herbert Simon has observed that this wealth of information that we have at our fingertips has caused a poverty of attention. And I think this is really important, because many of us can get frustrated that we are more interested in our clients' financial futures than they are. And we sort of assume that they are going to be interested in it. And we don't necessarily work hard enough at getting their attention in the first place. But attention is currency. This is what we have to think about. How do we grab it, and then how do we maintain it? And I read a really interesting book called Stolen Focus recently by Johan Hari. And in it, he points to some research that says we can't pay attention now for more than about 3 minutes without getting distracted. So 3 minutes, if you think about that, that is the time that it takes to boil an egg. So we've really got to cater to these shortening attention spans, these fracturing attention spans, and especially those who are in vulnerable circumstances, because we've got to make our communication so clear for those people in those difficult situations, because their bandwidth is taken up with lots of other stress and fear and emotion, which is very attention hungry, let's say. So how do we do this? Well, it's easier than you might think, because we naturally pay attention to things that we care about. We just do. And we all care about 3 things. We care about problems that we want to solve. So no doubt, when people have got a big inheritance tax situation or a complicated problem that they need you to solve, they're coming to you. This is probably why at the beginning of your relationships with your clients, there was no issue getting them to the meetings. But maybe now you've fixed all those problems and they're saying, well, nothing's changed at my end, so I don't really want to give up an hour of my time. So we care about problems that we want to solve. Some problems we're very happy just sort of dealing with, but others we want to solve. The next is we care about results, not process. So we care about performance. We don't really care so much about which monitoring, indices that you're using to track and monitor performances. We care about how's it doing, and am I on track? And does that mean I'm going to have enough? And then lastly, we care more about the future. We want to improve it and we want to secure it. We're less interested in what's gone behind. It's not that we're not interested. It's just in terms of gaining our attention, grabbing our attention, the future tends to be more evocative. So just to recap, we care about problems we want to solve, we care about results, not process, and we care more about the future, not the past. So with that in mind, we can now look at some of these pre-meeting communications to see why they might not be as effective as they could be. So here's a typical letter. I see this kind of thing quite a lot. Further to my previous communications and in line with my commitment to you as a valued client, review meetings are an essential part of the service I offer to ensure that your financial plans are on track to meet your needs. To confirm that your investment objectives and financial goals remain appropriate, I need to know if your circumstances have changed, as this may impact the ongoing suitability of your existing investments with us. So would anyone like to say through the chat, what could be improved in those couple of paragraphs? Anyone want to jump in with, like, now you know what you know, what might you say? Jono, I've got your question. I'll come back to it if that's all right. Too wordy, compliance focused, everything. Copilot rewrite, please. Start with what the client cares about, the future of their investments. Yeah. It's not broken up, too wordy, just 2 paragraphs, no sense witches. It's a bit boring. It is a bit boring, isn't it? There's no what's in it for them. It's too formal. Great. Okay, super. I agree with you. Here's just a couple of points that I wanted to make. If any of you have been on my sessions before, you know that I'm a big fan of writing from the reader's perspective. And in this situation, there's a lot of me, my, I. We want to flip it so there's a lot more of you and your and communicating in a way that's really relevant for them. Another writing technique is to show, don't tell. So don't tell them they're a valued client. Show them they're a valued client by doing a little bit more research and including what they care about. So is it retiring at 65? Is it buying that second home? Is it saving up for a big holiday? So show, don't tell. It's quite formal. I need to know. But just a couple of those tweaks would make a difference. Here's another paragraph I see quite a lot. To ensure your objectives are up to date and your financial plans remain suitable, I strongly recommend we conduct a formal annual review. This is a core part of the ongoing advice I provide and for which you continue to pay an ongoing advice charge. So again, formal, yeah, formal and conducting. All these words are quite stiff, quite scary. Remember, emotional money is really emotional. And we want to make sure that people feel like they can come to the meeting and share some of their challenges with us. I'm sure many of you do this, but I just want to highlight, some of the communications that might be putting off clients from coming along. Just move what you've done. Yeah. Okay. One of the other things I know happens quite a lot in firms is people are calling up to arrange the reviews. So they might not be sending out the letters. And this is often what people might be saying. It's time for your review. It's that time of year again. We offer you a financial review at least once a year, as it's a regulatory requirement for us. It's a regulatory requirement that we meet and discuss your financial situation each year. So I think, and I understand there is a lot of pressure on you if your clients aren't responding or they're declining, the requests for the meeting. You've got the FCA saying you need to be delivering these services if you're charging for them. And so you're sometimes stuck between a rock and a hard place because you've got the regulator saying you need to be doing this and clients saying, I don't want to. And when you're in that situation, what we have to do is not talk about you and the stress that you're under. It's about how do you reposition the meeting so that the clients go, oh, that's going to be a really good use of my time. One of my clients has actually set themselves a benchmark of getting clients to call them for their annual review because they are so central to their lives running smoothly. Yeah, exactly, Adrian. It doesn't excite the client or show the value that the meeting's going to offer. Okay, so how it might sound. I'm just going to give you a couple of pointers. I've got lots more I could say on this, but I don't want to overwhelm you. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon and discussing your financial future. So we're taking it out of the past and we're putting it into the future. Or you could say, I'm looking forward to seeing you soon and discussing your plan for retirement or your holiday plans or something like that's really juicy and exciting and they want to talk about it. Last time we spoke, you mentioned you'd like to retire at 65. A lot can happen in a year and a lot has happened, especially in the markets. So it's important that we meet to ensure you're still on track to stop work and still live comfortably. So I hope you can see that if you've got your good objectives and you've summarized them in your file, that process doesn't take too long to make sure that you're tailoring it so that they get the value of why they should meet with you. We're future focused, and also this helps to overcome that objection, which I hear quite a lot from clients of my clients saying, nothing's changed at my end. I'm all good. I don't need to meet you. But obviously, it's not obvious from us that there is a lot of change in the markets, and we need to underline the relevancy of that change and how that might impact their financial plans and their goals. So they might not realize that, but of course, from a compliance perspective, we need to understand whether their risk, the relationship with risk, their comfort with risk has changed, and what their capacity of loss is like. So, of course, we don't want to say that to them at this stage, but by demonstrating that stuff is changing, just increases the relevancy of the meeting. So, as I mentioned, small changes can make a big difference. And Rachel was one of my clients, and she was really frustrated with her review letters. She was in that place feeling really stuck. with her letter that just felt like it was ticking all the compliance boxes, but not that engaging for a client to read. And we've just made a few little tweaks, and now she's getting great feedback from clients who were saying this is so much better. She was getting, the odd client saying, I'm not sure this is exactly mirroring my situation. So if you'd like a sort of few sample letters, this is the pack that I mentioned. I'll share it again at the end. But I think I get quite excited about this because it really does often only need a few tweaks once you've understood those ground rules for effective communication. So some clients feel like, gosh, well, I've been meeting this family for years. I know all there is to know about them. I know their children, and therefore they worry that their review process is a bit repetitive, and they're looking for ways to sort of just tweak it a little bit to make it a bit more refreshing. And others sometimes feel like I just go through the motions. I want to make the meeting more engaging and looking for ways to perhaps deepen the relationship with clients. Maybe it's been very wealth management focused and they're looking to broaden the conversation out into a bit more, what's this money for? What are you going to do with it? So let's take a look at what we can ask clients, especially if you've had them for a long time. And this is important because I'm probably stating the obvious here, but Aegon's research demonstrated that 81% of clients want to be asked about life objectives, but only 31% of advisors think that that's relevant. I think that's so interesting. It's such a big disparity that I'm kind of curious about that. And maybe if we could perhaps talk about that at the end. When clients were asked what the top attribute in an advisor was, 74% said they understand my needs. And this is why I'm a big advocate of asking good questions, really sharpening your listening skills so that you really do understand your clients. These meetings, in my opinion, should be opportunities to learn more about your client so that they feel like you really understand them. So one of the questions that I really like, and I learned this from David Scarlett, is to open the meeting or to call ahead rather than say it's time for your review, is to say, we're looking forward to meeting you. What would make this an excellent use of your time? So you're demonstrating that we're not just going to run through a whole, standard agenda that we've done for years and years. We're going to cater it to what you're interested in. It also gets them thinking about what they want to talk about in good time. And then you can circle back to it at the end. And it's just another way of you demonstrating value. So let's think about, okay, where do we go if we've, that small talk part at the beginning of a meeting is you're just sort of warming up. Maybe you say, I'd love to hear about some of your highlights. What's been good? And when we're getting people into a, positive emotional state, they're going to enjoy the meeting more. Most people like thinking about what they're proud of or what they've achieved or what they've enjoyed or who they've liked spending time with. And it's just a really nice, conversational question. Again, what have you enjoyed working on or being involved in? And what made it so exciting or lovely? So just a couple of questions. And then if you feel like the moment is right, and I wouldn't start with this, well, it depends on how the meeting is going and the emotional state of your client, but what's been challenging? And the reason I think this is a good idea to ask is because Vouch4 shared this research in 22, which showed that within the first 5 years of a relationship, between sort of 40 and 30% of people don't feel able to discuss personal challenges. And what we mean by personal challenges in this context was huge things like divorce, bereavement, like massive life changes. And they didn't feel able to talk to their advisor about that. And I'm wondering why that is. Maybe it's because clients don't feel like this is an appropriate place to talk about that. Maybe they just didn't feel safe enough. The trust wasn't there. Maybe they just weren't asked. And again, you see, 10 years plus, 25% of people still don't feel like they can discuss their challenges with their advisor. So there's still quite a lot of opportunity here to demonstrate what this meeting is for your client. When it comes to future focus questions, as you think about the future, what possibilities do you see? And I really like this word possibilities, because if you ask, what are your goals? Some people might really like that question, and they might be very goal orientated and very motivated, and the achievement is high on their things that they value. But for someone that isn't very motivated by goals or doesn't have any, that can be quite a confronting question. So possibilities it just might get the conversation going a little bit more sort of, what's the word, get the conversation juices going a bit. Another way of asking a fairly similar question is, what's coming up that you anticipate as having an implication on your finances? So this is what Mitch Anthony calls transitions. So house moves, elderly parents, children's weddings, things like that. But also things like elderly parents, for example. No one puts their mother falling over and breaking her hip as a goal. And yet that kind of event might happen. And when that kind of event happens, money needs to be available to address it and cope with it. So this is the sort of difference between goals and objectives and transitions. And then again, what concerns or worries you about your next chapter? Just, if the trust is there and you're good at listening and you're really listening in a non-judgmental, open-minded, open-hearted way, you might learn all sorts of things, and you might be the person that they're telling things that they don't tell anybody else. One of my clients was told by a very elderly lady that she was going to leave her husband, and the husband had no idea. So you're in such a privileged position to have a real impact on people's lives if you've got the relationship and the trust there. So yes, there's many more questions in that pack. I just wanted to give you a few of my favorites. So let's now look at how we might confidently communicate the value of your advice. With Consumer Duty, of course, there's a big emphasis on how are we demonstrating their value. And as Grant Cardone says, when value exceeds price, people part with money. And value, of course, is extremely subjective. What one person values, another person might not. And Boring Money has put together a framework after lots of research and number crunching, demonstrating that when clients are thinking about whether they're receiving good value, it's good value for money, there are practical and emotional factors. So some clients mainly focus on the practical and the technical. They get their confidence and competence from the fact that they're an expert in this, and tax planning and investment management and all those good things which you all are. Good performance, of course, is a factor. Meeting the goals that they set out, recognizing that they've made more profit than they've paid in fees, so that all nicely works. And the advisor's been proactive, so remembering what some of these upcoming transitions were going to be, or the goals, or proactive in terms of what's happening in terms of the budget, end of tax year. That's the proactivity is really important in terms of helping reduce the cognitive load of your client. You're that person for them. And clients also really value the trust that they place in you, that they feel like they've got the peace of mind because you've done your cash flow modeling, and you will listen in a way that isn't judgmental, even if their financial affairs are a bit all over the place. They really value when your advisor understands you. that you're transparent, and that might be around fees. I know some advisors are a bit squeamish about talking about their fee structure, and yet clients want transparency. I think a lot of the reason there isn't that much trust, or that our industry has suffered with trust, is because this has all been a bit opaque, and it's difficult to actually figure out, what am I paying? And in my other courses, I talk a little bit more around how to do that. And provides reassurance. So when the markets are volatile, are you there to hold their hand? That, by explaining and communicating that you knew this was going to happen, it's just you didn't know when. So providing reassurance that you're on track, you've got enough, markets are volatile, but we know that, that's partly why we take the risk to get the returns. So having recognized those two factors, they then put together 5 pillars of value, but not all pillars are created equal. So we can see, and I hear this quite a lot from clients when they're thinking about who does most of the talking in a meeting, and when they say things like, but there's so much I need to tell them. And when you look at that, actually, the information part, in terms of what clients perceive as value, is only, it's less than a quarter. What's more important for the clients is trust and peace of mind. So a lot of that is, are you asking those right questions and listening so that the client feels like you totally understand them, and that you can offer them that peace of mind. And that peace of mind, of course, will rest on your expertise and the performance that you're able to demonstrate. The planning side, you see, just under a quarter again. That's why I'm a big advocate of calling this a planning meeting, not a review meeting. We need to understand what's coming up for them in order to plan effectively. I'm probably teaching you to suck eggs. It's just that I want to really emphasize this point. So just bear that in mind when you're thinking about how you would ordinarily communicate the value of your advice. The things that your client values might be quite different from what you perceive them to value, or you expect them to value. So yeah, I'm just going to stop there on that front and just share a few questions that you can use straight away. So if you had asked what would make this meeting a good use of your time, at the end of the meeting, you can say, look, you mentioned you wanted to cover inheritance tax planning, or something. How much progress have we made? And what further questions do you have, if any? So you're really catering to the thing that they wanted to, and you're circling back at the end of the meeting so that there's this sense of satisfaction and completion. Another question that I like asking, and I tend to encourage people to ask this in first meetings as well, is, when we started working together, or if it was a first meeting, it would be, how would you currently rate your financial peace of mind? Or how would you currently rate your confidence in finance? And you're just getting them to give you a figure out of 10. And that can really lead to some interesting conversations. If they rate it 3, you can then say, what made you choose 3 and not 2? So you get a sense of what they do understand. And then you can have a big chat about the worries and their confusion or their fear around running out, or just the jargon, or the level of information that's sent and they don't read it, and therefore they're in the dark. There's a really good conversational tool is to ask people to scale things that are a little bit ambiguous and hard to quantify. So that's one of my favorite questions. I mean, I've got lots of favorite questions. And then you might want to ask, what would you like to see as an outcome of our work together next year? So you're very clear on what they are determining as outcomes. So super concrete. So as you may have picked up already, the one idea that I really want to ram home is, let's change the name of this meeting. Let's not call it an annual review meeting, and let's call it a planning or a progress meeting. That then infers that it's going to be more relevant to them. And some of my clients who've just made that small tweak have seen a difference in take up. So really super small idea, but can make a big difference. So let's just review the review meeting mistakes. And I call it an annual review just because lots of people still call it that. But yeah, first one, focusing predominantly on the past. Second one, sending letters but not getting much engagement. So hopefully now you can see why those pre-meeting communications might not be as effective as they could be. Talking too much and not listening enough. So when you see what clients value, we need to do less talking. People are struggling to balance compliance requirements and holding an engaging meeting. So I think, as an example, I'm not going to talk too much about this because not that many of you actually said that in the initial part, but let's just take risk, for example, because you need to ensure that their comfort level with risk is updated. But getting people to fill out risk profiles and risk questionnaires in the meeting can work. Another way of doing it is if there have been some events in the news and they've asked you about that, that would be quite a conversational way to say, has that meant that you feel less comfortable with being so invested in equities or something like that? So you're kind of just conversationally talking about these topics and getting a sense of where they're at. Now, I'm not an expert in cognitive bias. It's just I'm trying to find ways for you to make this conversational and get a feel of where they're at. I've also got an agenda in that pack that I mentioned. And then lastly, this mistake is lacking a process really to get engagement all the way through. And also the understanding piece, which we need to really make sure that clients do understand what we're saying and sending them. And so let's just focus on this a little bit. I think the reason why the process isn't quite as engaging as it could be is largely because firms are often designed to optimize for efficiency. It's a bit like the templates and the standard letters. I get it. You can't be writing from scratch all the time. It's just that some clients feel like that's not the service that they're after. Everybody feels like their own situation is unique to them. And even though you might see lots of people about to retire, or you specialize in divorce, or you specialize in lawyers, you're familiar with that. We need to make sure that people feel like their situation is unique, and often, of course, it is. So I think, one of the reasons is that the processes have been designed for efficiency, and often this priority has been given to the technical side of things. And that's no fault of your own, because that's what you were trained in. There hasn't been an awful lot of support in terms of how you communicate in a way that's clear and easy to understand and compelling, which is, of course, what I'm mad passionate about. And so I think that there is this perception that you can't do both. But that's not the case. And this is why I put the pack together. So very quickly, I'll just run through what's involved in case you want to get it. Some subject lines, checklists to make sure that those pre-meeting communications are gonna work, an agenda, letters. If you're getting ignored, a couple of ways to get their attention, the questions that I mentioned, some phrases. If you are someone who's been largely focused on wealth management and you're looking to broaden the conversation, but you feel a little bit like, well, maybe they are going to say, well, why haven't you asked me this before? Or, for example, if your objectives aren't quite detailed enough in terms of what they're going to do with the money, you might feel a little reticent about asking them now when that you probably should have done it years ago. So just some phrases around how you might do that. And there's a little video format, a little video, and some suggestions, and then a call just to make sure that you implement it. So you can just download it. I'll share the link in a moment, but I do want to make sure that you actually use the materials. That's why I schedule a call. So yeah, there's a little video and lots of downloadable PDFs so that you can pull out sample phrases and adopt them in your own emails and letters. Lots of people like it. So yes, I don't want to talk too much about that because I want to answer some of your questions. But just before we do that, hopefully you can now recognize and avoid those common mistakes. Those 3 ground rules for effective communication. Remember, we care more about problems than we care more about the future than the past. We care about problems that we want to solve, and we care about results, not process. Lots of pre-meeting communications don't work because they don't use those ground rules. We've looked at some good questions to ask to refresh some of those long-standing relationships, things about, what they've enjoyed, what they're proud of, any challenges that they might have been experiencing. Understanding what clients value. And of course, everybody's different and everybody's firm will have a different way of gathering what clients value. I'm a big advocate of client surveys. I think, when I mean surveys, I mean like independent surveys. I many years ago, actually, I ran a survey for a firm who just wanted me to talk to their top 15 clients just to ask, what do they like, what do they not like, what do they want to change? And their firm they specialized in business owners who, of course, are very busy, big picture thinkers. And the overwhelming feedback that we got was they just didn't want the level of detail. They just wanted to see whether they were on track, using images. And they've got this, of course, cash flow modeling, which worked really well. They just didn't want all the detail. And so we were able to get that insight from that exercise, which ended up saving them lots of money. And now you can hopefully call it a planning or a progress meeting, not a review, or a suitability meeting. Sometimes I've heard firms call it that. And the reason why the suitability meeting isn't compelling, you can probably guess, is because that's process, it's not results. So some of you had emailed me with questions that you wanted me to ask in today's session. I'll just check the time. Good, we've got lots of time. How do you get busy clients, high value clients consistently engaged? Well, again, it's how you position the meeting in their mind. I'm calling and I'm emailing clients all the time. Yeah, I'm interested in how you can better engage clients that may not have large funds under management. It's a battle to get them to see the importance of regular views and ongoing relationships. So again, I think that line that I've got in that letter, which is around lots of things change and we can't do anything unless we've spoken to you. Your money may be working harder. You may have to pay more tax than is necessary. Everyone hates paying more tax than is necessary. So using phrases that illustrate the consequence of inaction. Remember, we move towards things that we want and away from things that we don't. So when you're framing your request, can you incorporate both of those towards and away from? I talk more about that in my writing program, which I'm not going to talk about now, but you can email me if you're interested in details on that. And this was a good question. Do you think you can segment the quality or the detail of your review report based on how much a client is paying and therefore the likely complexity of their needs? So just to be absolutely clear, I am not a compliance expert. And I think what I would suggest here is, as long as you are very clear in the price structure and the level of service that you offer for that price, then I would imagine compliance would be happy. I think if when you take on a client at that first meeting and you have a sense of their complexity, then you're probably not going to suggest that they go on the lowest tier. And I think people understand that, we have to communicate in a way that's clear, fair, and not misleading. So I think as long as from the outset that you've explained, things change, it may be that they were very had a very simple scenario at the beginning. Maybe they just wanted to set up a pension, and then suddenly they've inherited some tax, and they've inherited a load of money, and the situation has suddenly got complicated. So I think at that phase, if the scope of the work had changed, then it would be a conversation to say, okay, we need to charge more because the situation is more complex. So that would be my take on it. But if there are any compliance experts on the call, then maybe you could share your view. But yeah, I guess the other thing I would say is more words doesn't equal more value. So yes, you might want to spend more time on the client because the situation is more complicated, but try not to include tons and tons of detail in the main body of the report. What the FCA is looking for is layering. It's one of the things that they talk about. So keep the key information up front, and then if you want to add a lot more detail, put it at the back. But not everyone shares our love of detail. So yes, if anyone's got any thoughts on that, you can share them. So yes, there's the pack. Any more questions? We've got a little bit of time for questions now. If anyone has got any questions, or if anyone would like to say what stood out for them and whether they're going to which of those mistakes they're going to focus on, that would be interesting for me to hear. I hope you feel like you've got some things to use. Jono, I know you asked me a question right at the beginning. Let me just see if I can get it. Okay. Are you a fan of clients filling in a form ahead of the meeting? Are you stressed about anything, existing assets, change in circumstances need to be aware of? Do you think it works? I guess it can work. I personally would, rather than get them to do a questionnaire, which can feel a bit arduous, is maybe just to drop them an email and say, is there anything that I should be aware of? So I think some people, especially if people are slightly older, people who are also neurodivergent, do like to know what they're going to be talking about in the meeting. So I think anything that you can do ahead of the meeting to prepare clients is a good idea. So I guess in essence, my answer would be yes, do get in touch with them, but I just don't know whether a questionnaire is quite the right medium. I think it depends on if you're having also to get quite a lot of data from them to assess their capacity of loss. So if they're already having to fill out information on income and outgoings and things like that, they might just feel like, oh God, it's all this paperwork. I just can't be bothered to meet. So yeah, I think you'd have to take it on a case-by-case basis. And I know you work with lawyers, so I would imagine, again, they're super busy. So you could just try and keep it top line. Yeah, Ricardo, yes, of course. So if you did buy the pack, you might have questions. That's the whole point of the implementation call. So the idea is, 2 or 3 weeks once you've downloaded it, then we have a 30-minute call, and that's when I answer your questions or give you some suggestions. So yes, that's the whole point of the call, because I think lots of people will buy things and then go, right, I've bought it, and then just move it to the side. So I really don't want you to do with that, because I think the reviews are so important for clients' financial well-being, and I just think small changes can make a real big difference to their financial well-being. Sarah, it's practice, I think. So this becomes a habit. I'm learning all the time. We're all learning all the time, so thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Melissa. Newly appointed, the resource you offer looks really helpful. Yeah, great. Okay. I mean, take it or leave it. I hope it's practical. Any more questions? I don't want to keep you here any longer than is necessary. I will email you all and include the link as well, so that you can watch it again at your own leisure. But if you do have any questions, then that my email is on that slide, so you can drop me a line directly as well. Okay, thank you, everybody.